Hello there, all you wondrous, web-wandering beasts. Brandon Valentine, the pretentious Fiend here, back at it again with another album review, and this time with a glorious new haircut, courtesy of the absolutely amazingly talented Lisa and her wonderful team over at Hendrix Hair & Co. down in Richmond. But most importantly, we're here today to have a little look at the 8th studio album by indie pop kings, the Kings of Leon. The album, of course, When You See Yourself. But before we get too far into the review, make sure you like, share, subscribe, do all the things. Yes, I have nothing cynical to say because I really like this haircut, so I'm happy. For now, the existential dread is being fended off. The wolves have been kept at the gate by physical transformations and vapid little image changes. So the album starts off straight away with the title track, When You See Yourself, Are You Far Away? This title track really harkens back to a lot of that mid to late noughties indie pop, but yet is mixed with these really sweet and subtle 80s synth and glissando kind of keys tones at the same time. And along with those 80s tones comes Gary Newman and The Cure. Although we start off with that pretty sort of stock standard da-da-da-da-da-da snare drum roll that you would expect and that you've heard from a lot of indie songs before, this track immediately doesn't really add anything new to the annals of indie history, but it is a nice harken back. It does have a nice juice to it that really does remind me of this style of music 15 odd years ago. So it is nice for a bunch of millennials to hang around and say, yeah, nostalgia. But all of this acts as a really nice bed to lyrics that allude to self-reflection, self-analysis, and whether you're doing enough in the world, not just externally, but also internally for yourself and those around you. From there, we really dig into The Bandit, which serves with a lot of pretty frantic indie energy. It's not too heavy, it's not like alienatingly heavy for indie listeners and pop listeners. If you're a big rock fan, you will look at this and be like, not heavy or energetic, it's weak. And all of this energy really bursts forward and becomes a great soundtrack to a much more storytelling type of lyrical structure, as opposed to being allegorical or representative. You have lyrics that are just literally telling a fictitious story. The story of this outlaw on the run, the bandit, and the stern, stoic bounty hunter that pursues him. All in all, this is a fun, enjoyable track in terms of just being a kind of four-to-the-floor indie rock banger. But then we have tracks like 1000 People that are a lot more subtle and a lot more subdued and tend to have a bit more of a jam feel. And this track and tracks kind of its ilk end up sitting in the background a lot more. They end up being a much more of a background listen. And so they kind of end up becoming the bench warmers of the album a little bit, unfortunately. And I say unfortunately because it does have this really nice infectious bass pulse that just sits on a C and just thumps, but it really gives a lot of room for there to be nice production elements and tones around that absolutely simplistic note structure. And followed on from that, you have this really nice chord shift from a E sharp to an E, dropping in from the verse to the chorus that has a really nice darkness to it, considering that you have this real C major feel in the verse. I must admit I added a few twiddly bits. But I will say that this track does really nicely capture that lonely, hollow being away from home feeling of an endless tour and endless road. Obviously in this case, finding solace in the applause and cheers of 100,000 people on the road. Oh, it must be so hard to be able to successfully tour and play to thousands of people without having to eat what you find at a pub floor and sleep in a bathtub. And then from the more subtle vibes, we move into something that is definitely more Beatles inspired, like Stormy Weather. A song with a nice amount of early English 60s pop kind of energy to it, and has this lyrical tone of wistfully looking back at the better times of your youth. But yet again, in this kind of spirit of up and down with the energy and the vibe of the album, we drop into a wave. And it starts with, you know, some piano. I'll be honest, I'm really not a big fan of piano ballads. I feel like they are criminally overused by guitarists like me who sit there and go, I'm playing piano. But thankfully we move on pretty quickly from that pretty simple D sharp major triad, D sharp major 6, back to the triad, D sharp major 7. Thankfully we move on from that to a much more energized but also sonically rich and dynamic cut, with fuzzed out guitars and a really cheeky kind of drum beats that are enjoyably pokey, which sounds very kinky. And apparently this song was the most difficult song for the band, for Kings of Leon, to actually have worked on in their entire damn career. And to be honest, sometimes you can hear that, but you can only really hear this if you've had a song like this in your career. A song that starts from a simple, basic idea and gets worked up in the studio. And unfortunately, the process to making a song like this can be really inorganic sometimes. It can be really frustrating. But the upside of all of this is that a song like this allows the production process to actually be a really powerful artistic tool for you to use. Golden Resistance Age really brings home the Cure vibes in a strong, strong way, with this woody, pulsing bass and this refraining guitar riff that interjects in the verse, similar to a Franz Ferdinand song. This is absolutely one of my favorite tracks on the album, and I think it's where this band really shines, is this mid-pace indie charge of a rock song. And its kind of positive, forward-moving energy really does thematically fit with its lyrical content of kind of generational differences and finding what it is that you want to change in the world when you're young, cynical, and angry. Vintage energy vibes keep up with the track Time to Disguise. Now, I really dug the bridge of the song. Just straight off the bat, love the bridge of the song as an entirety. The little bizarre off-kilter guitar triplets were a nice, interesting textural layer. Pokey, aggressed nature works really well for a track that seems to be dealing with the idea of dealing with your emotions and personal persona while under public scrutiny. The track Supermarché, supermarket, is a real road trip dreamy style track that evokes images of slow motion montages at the beach and hanging around at a bonfire by night for like a Corona ad, complete with some Red Hot Chili Peppers scar tissue style slide guitar bits and pieces and this chimey constant cymbal use, which is really nice. You're kind of tonally put in this idea of hopping in a van and escaping the woes of the world behind you, leaving it all behind and getting sand in your knickers and surfing or doing whatever it is that people do at the beach. Do I look like the type of fucking person who goes to the beach? No. The track Claire and Eddie is a real anomaly on this album, kind of thematically and even stylistically. It's an acoustically strummed, ballady styled country track. But instead of being a ballad to "I love you baby, I fucking yeah, you're the one for me," which if anyone ever sings to you like that, just run, because I'm sure every glass in their house smells like fucking Rohypnol. Thematically, this is a love song to the earth. A song about the mistreatments we give the earth, the fractured relationship we have with it, and a call to it trying to say how much we actually do appreciate all the beauty and glory it gives us and the sustainability it gives us. We're met with a huge charge after this much more laid-back, relaxed country-style track. Rolling snares, snorty jangling guitars, kicking off into the track echoing, with these tones that remind me at points of like vaudevillian Sgt. Pepper's style jaunty tones, but all that mixed in with surf chords and a much more surf frantic energy. I love the energy that this song sets up, but it just never pays off. It constantly is in this orbit. Sometimes you're sitting there at the end of it thinking, it's like the musical version of Blue Balls. Closing out the album with the track Fairy Tale, we're met with this dark yet bitterly sweet acoustic and creeping track. And the really strong sense of melancholy, although there's a lot of more major acoustic tones going on, there is that melancholic swell of synths and way over delayed guitars and these strings that sound as if they're from a warped vinyl. This ends up being a really nice way to actually close out the album, and normally I'm not a big advocate for closing it out on such a somber moment, but there is a really serious, dark, nasty, melancholic haunt to this, and this really does have a strong resemblance in a lot of ways to a track like Lou Reed's Take a Walk on the Wild Side. All in all, this album has some really nice fun moments, most notably within the more energetic, frantic tracks that harken back to that more mid-noughties style indie rock and pop that has a lot of those underlying tones of the Beatles and the Cure. But there are a few tracks that do go on the more drag side, unfortunately, I would say, that are sweet and nice listens. There's a lot of vulnerability vocally in this album, as there always actually is with Kings of Leon. But more importantly, there's a link below. Go have a listen, come back, let me know what you think. Let's discuss the finer points of the Kings of Leon. Brandon Valentine, the pretentious Fiend, signing off here, and for goodness sake, remain filthy.